Hello, everybody. I am Maxim Jago. In fact, let me stop sharing for a second so you can see me. Hello, hello. I am Maxim Jago, and I'm here today to share with you an overview of where I think we're at today with artificial intelligence, what the future holds, and to explore a little bit about what I think might be happening socioeconomically in the future and where we're headed overall as a species in our relationship with artificial intelligence. This promises to be a really broad sweep. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to give you a good opportunity to ask questions. I'll try and check the Q&A pod every now and then, but if you are unfamiliar with Zoom, you'll notice if you wiggle the mouse around at the bottom of the screen, there's a button that says Q&A. And if you click on that, you should find that you can ask questions. And I will look out for those. I'm just checking. Yep, that's all enabled. And so I'll either answer at the end or I'll try and check maybe halfway through and see if people have got things that they want to ask about. So without any further ado, I will start the presentation. Just check we are recording okay. Great. Okay. Now, so this presentation is called the AI Era, What Lies Ahead. And I want to start out by looking at where we're at with artificial intelligence today. So it's really, and by the by, you're going to notice, you're going to spot right away that basically all of the content of this presentation was generated either by DALL-E using ChatGPT or Midjourney. And it's noteworthy that you can spot almost instantly that images created by artificial intelligence applications or autonomous systems are recognizable. It's really interesting that you can tell right away it's just a bit too perfect. It's just a bit too correct. And you know, therefore, that it was generated by a machine. But that's just today. If you give it a little bit of time, I think it'll become increasingly difficult to differentiate between an AI and a human creative. And there's a bunch of references on here. You know, famously, generative AI systems are not very good at text. And you can see just how poorly it's done here. It kind of looks like a chalkboard wherever there's text on the screen. But we are today at a point where there's this flowering, this blossoming of big data, and systems are increasingly efficient at looking at that big data and using algorithms, which is just a kind of, it's a clever word for a calculation, really, to analyze that data and produce meaningful information from it. So data is raw and information is meaningful. I'm being lazy with language, but that's probably a reasonable broad brushstroke distinction. And so what we're finding with AI today is that it's not really artificial intelligence. AI today is really algorithmic imitation. So the algorithms, these calculations, are so efficient at pretending to have human-like thoughts that we kind of can't always differentiate between it. We feel like the AI is thinking, but really it's just saying things and producing words or images that would be likely to be accepted by us as intelligent. So you can ask ChatGPT to provide a summary of a website. It'll look at that content and it'll give you a pretty reasonable summary. But it's a little bit clunky. It's a little bit like a trainee working on this content. If anyone's ever asked an AI to write a document, you'll know that every time you're going to need to rework that document, you're going to need to do some editing. And of course, there are better and worse AIs for this purpose. Claude is better at writing content. Perplexity is better at researching. There are these different brands that have different strengths and weaknesses. But again, I think we're at about version 1.2 for the implementation of these imitation systems that seem like they're intelligent. But it's important to remember that we really are early on in the development of this technology. And if you think about the early cars, the first cars had a person walking in front of them with a flag. They were considered incredibly dangerous. and broke down very often. And lots of people were saying at the time, well, why wouldn't I just use a horse and cart? I've got a horse. The horse is intelligent. It avoids obstacles in the road. I just feed it. I don't need to get fuel from anywhere for it to work, and so on. But of course, these were the early generations of the motor vehicles that we had. In fact, as we got into more advanced motor vehicles, there was a tipping point where there was really no justification for using a horse and cart for most purposes. For transportation, transportation of goods, transportation of people, the whole experience gradually got better and better and better. Now, the speed of development with artificial intelligence is significantly faster than the speed with which cars developed. It's incomparable. I would say that, goodness, just 5 years ago, you would see some really major technological development every 3 months, maybe. And in the last year or two, it's been monthly, then weekly. And honestly, now I think in the realm of artificial intelligence, we're starting to see developments daily, even twice daily. It's truly extraordinary what's happening. And what's happening is we're getting systems that are increasingly effective at autonomous decision making, right? Automatic decision making. They're getting better and better at it, faster and faster, so that they become more and more useful. It's a little bit like comparing calculating numbers using an abacus and calculating them using a calculator, a pocket calculator. It really is dramatically faster. But of course, this might be stretching the analogy, but people still have to press the buttons on the calculator. We're also seeing a really dramatic change in cost. Now, the first HD TV, this is hilarious. I spent ages trying to get an AI to make a realistic looking image of one of the first HD TVs. And in the end, I gave up and I've settled for this. But the first HD TVs, so high definition 1920 by 1080 resolution TVs, were about $100,000. And now you can get an HD TV for $100. Now, it won't look like that. You can probably buy a TV that size nowadays for 500 or 600 pounds, maybe even less, maybe 400, 500 pounds in the sales. But you can get a massive, extraordinarily high quality, ultra high definition TV now for 300 or 400, but certainly you can get a high definition screen for under 100. This is 1,000 to 1 ratio, 1,000 to 1, 1,000 times cheaper getting your HD TV. And we're seeing this dramatic transformation in access to resources. A great example is Google Maps. As long as you have a smartphone, ideally one with a compass in it and a GPS, which is most of the modestly high-end smartphones, you get access to Google Maps for free, and it provides you with the most ridiculously, extraordinarily advanced transportation information and road maps and satellite views and 3D views. And it'll show you route finding across multiple countries, cost you nothing, just cost you the data it needs to come in and out of the application. So where are we going next? So we've got natural language interaction with computers is coming very, very soon. Apple announced with iOS 18 that's about to come out that they're doing speech analysis on your phone. So it doesn't have to go off to some cloud somewhere, doesn't have to go off to some distant server to be analyzed. There's no security issues. Just on your device in your hand, it can analyze your speech and understand what you're saying, and in many cases, act upon your words. It's only where bigger processing tasks are required that it has to go off into the cloud. This is crazy. It's cray-cray. It's insane that the technology in your hand can do that. And what it means is that we're moving now inexorably towards a time where we just have conversations with computers. Imagine that world for a second. Imagine a world where you can just talk to a persistent identity, a persistent persona on your phone, on your laptop, on your iPad, you name it. And this persistent persona becomes part of your life. So one of the first instances we're looking at this is AI agents. And people talked about AI agents a lot with ChatGPT, because ChatGPT allowed you to pre-program a particular conversation where you could say, okay, for the purposes of this conversation, for example, you're a marketing person, you're a uh, a whiz at developing marketing strategies, and that's your focus, and you're aggressive and you're succinct, and you could describe the characteristics, but it's really just for a particular conversation. ChatGPT doesn't particularly hold those characteristics in a persistent persona over a long period of time. We're moving towards this now. And for many years, I've been calling these PPAs, private personal assistants. These are persistent personas that you speak to in a natural way that has access. It'll have access to your credit card, your calendar. It'll run your life for you. It'll be like having a virtual butler that will take care of all of the logistics in your life for you and will know everything about you, your health data, you name it, your diet. It'll order food for you. It'll take care of everything. And it will be good, I'm afraid. And it will mean losing a lot of our privacy, I'm afraid. But it'll be worth it. You'll just feel like your life gets easier. We're also moving towards fully autonomous robots. Now, most of the robots that we see in videos of factories are actually they're really pre-programmed. They're not particularly autonomous. And by autonomous, I mean automatically examining an environment or a situation, taking in information, and making autonomous decisions about the information that's been provided. And we've seen some really impressive examples of this coming with humanoid robots, where the person that is controlling the robot will say, "Okay, what's this?" And they hold up a tomato, and the robot says, "Oh, that's a tomato. That's something you would eat." And it knows that the tomato is edible. Or perhaps there's a plate on a countertop, and the robot recognizes, the AI, I should say, recognizes the plate and knows that the plate should be stacked. It's not edible. So that's autonomous decision making. But we're increasingly seeing now in factory situations as well, these robots are able to make intelligent decisions and really take away a lot of the drudgery of human activity. There was a big story recently, a few months ago, with Amazon taking on an enormous amount of robots, where their task was to take the empty crates that had products in them and put them back on the stack. And this was a task that was performed by humans for a long time, and it's just incredibly boring. You're literally taking a box and moving it from one flat surface to another flat surface. I suspect that very quickly, though, we'll begin to see a lot more being done by these robots in the Amazon factories. Then, of course, a lot of people are talking about autonomous vehicles. Now, the thing about autonomous vehicles is that they transform what it means to drive, not just in terms of safety. Right now, we're probably at about, there's 5 levels of development for autonomous vehicles, generally speaking. Level 3 means that it's about 200 times safer than a human driver. That's where we are right now. But so maybe 3.2. It's a couple of hundred times safer than a human driver. Unfortunately, when it goes wrong, it really goes wrong. Like it'll just drive off a cliff. And of course, nobody wants to take that risk, even though overall they're already much safer than human drivers. When we get to level 4, 4.2, it'll be significantly safer than a human driver, and we'll start to see general availability. But autonomous vehicles changes a lot for us socioeconomically. There's a lot that people aren't talking about. A lot of people are saying, well, do I really want to have a car drive me around? What about things like the cost of insurance? If you have a vehicle that's thousands of times safer than a human driver, well, who actually is insured? Is it the engineers? Is it the designers? Is it just like a public liability insurance? There isn't even going to be a steering wheel. So how can you be held liable for making a mistake and having an accident? It means the car will manage itself. If it needs a repair, it'll probably drive itself to go and get repaired. It means you can have 5 people sitting in the car and you can all look at each other. It means that commuting could be just an extra bit of sleep time while the car takes you from an hour, 2 hours away from home. You're sleeping in that time, and then you arrive refreshed and ready for work. There's a lot of changes. It also means people that are dangerous drivers or people that are just, they're old, they're not allowed to have a license anymore. They now have freedom and mobility. This is enormously impactful for our society, and it's coming. It's coming very soon. If you know anybody that's an Uber driver, you can let them know that fairly soon, Uber are heavily invested in self-driving vehicles. Something like 70% of the cost of a self-driving vehicle is the driver. The money goes to the driver. Once Uber and Lyft and Bolt and FreeNow, once these companies have fully autonomous vehicles, they could make the journey 1/3 of the current cost and still make more profit and have less admin and less to deal with, fewer court cases, all of that. just less to deal with as a company overall than having human drivers. And I recognize that as I'm saying this, that this kind of sounds like sci-fi. Like we've all heard the news reports, but it seems like a long way off. But realistically, we are, once, as is often the case with technologies, we're probably 3 to 5 years away from this being commonplace. I had a ride in an autonomous vehicle in Las Vegas. I just ordered a Lyft. It's a bit like Uber. We don't have Lyft in the UK. But I just ordered like an Uber, and the car came with two very nervous scientists sitting in the front seats and took me on a conspicuously boring journey through Las Vegas. I wanted it to be boring. That's exactly what I would like with a self-driving car. This is now. This is not technology of the future. This is being built right now. And of course, we're looking at autonomous aircraft. There's a company called VRCO that I've been in touch with recently that's looking at developing these kinds of technologies in the long term. And we're now looking at aircraft that can be completely autonomous with electric jet engines that will carry people around the world with relatively small numbers of passengers, completely transforming what it means to travel internationally. And of course, we're building humanoid robots. I just love this photo, this image. I went back and forth on a few different images, and I love the fact that the robot just looks like it's done for the day, and it's time to put its feet up. But of course, there's some very important features of these humanoid robots that we're building for the home that people aren't really talking about. Of course, there's a lot of work to be done before people feel comfortable having these robots around. But we are looking at autonomous robots for whom it's a software update for them to be not just cooking and cleaning, but also a qualified electrician, a plumber, a car mechanic. The system will be able to do gardening, building, painting and decorating, cottage nursing skills. There's a lot that that humanoid robot will be able to do for you in the home. And it does, of course, put into question, I'll come back around to this later. It puts into question, well, what happens now to the certified electricians, to the plumbers, all of the people that have invested heavily in having skills and skilled labor. Now, let me just have a quick check. I'm just going to bring up the Q&A pod here. Okay, I don't see any questions yet. Great. So it puts into question what we're going to do with people, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the reason we're designing humanoid robots rather than robots on wheels or looking like Daleks or something else is that we live in an environment that's designed for human-shaped people. And so most robotics engineers agree that if we're going to create robots that will operate in a human environment, they probably might as well be humanoid. I do think there's an argument for giving them extra limbs. I think it would be, be pretty cool if the humanoid robots had roller skate feet and forearms instead of two. But I suspect that it would be so jarring for the humans around them that we would feel too uncomfortable and not want them around. It's also worth noting that the way that these robots will move will be completely natural looking. It will very much feel like a person in a robot suit, if that makes any sense. And also the tone of voice, the subvocal stresses, the emotional authenticity of the persona of the robot will also feel very much like a human. Robots can already, or AI can already interpret human sentiment more precisely than a team of therapists. That's already today. And so you will have a humanoid robot around you that just feels very comfortable to be around and wants to look after you and make sure everything's okay. And you know what? If you need a sandwich, here's a sandwich. In fact, it already knew that you needed a sandwich because it's been monitoring your diet for years and it knows exactly what you need to eat. We're also looking at some incredible medical advances. And actually, this is already well established. This is not an image of it. This is made up by, I think this one was Midjourney. But there's a thing called a RoboDoc, which performs surgeries based on tracking the movements of world-class surgeons. And it performs these surgeries so fast and so precisely that the surgery itself takes something like, I can't remember, a fifth, maybe a tenth of the time that a surgery performed by a human surgeon would take. And the recovery times are 3 times faster. The surgery itself is more precise, but there are fewer number of stitches. The patient is under full anesthetic for a shorter amount of time. And they're adding and adding and adding and adding different surgeries that the RoboDoc can perform. Not my favorite name for a technology, but I guess it makes it feel comfortable. There's also AI technologies now that are doing things like AlphaFold from Google. They examined every possible combination of proteins and what their effects would be, so they can speed up the development of novel molecules that can be used for therapeutic purposes. So we're seeing these incredible advances happening already, and we haven't even really kicked into using super advanced technologies like quantum computing to process the work of the AIs. So where are we socioeconomically? What's going to happen in terms of money and the concept of wealth? So I would say, and I'm not a sociologist, I'm not an economist, I'm not a mathematician, but broadly speaking, I would say that money itself is the barter system 2.0. So we had, you've got some cows, I've got some sheep. I'll give you so many sheep for one cow. There's the barter system. We take whatever we're prepared to take in exchange for something. And it's that worked for us as a species for a really, really long time. But if we could somehow extract the value of something that we own and have a universal unit of measurement for that value, we no longer need to walk around with the cow, walk around with the sheep. We can now translate the value of a thing both in space and time. I can sell a sheep for 5 pieces of gold and hold those 5 pieces of gold for a year and then exchange, then barter that gold for something else. So when we developed money as a meaningful system, and of course there's a big debate to be had about virtual currencies and fiat currency and wealth, but just to keep it simple, when we developed money as an idea, coinage, for example, this massively improved our ability to exchange value for items and services. Now I can exchange a week of mowing the fields for you. I can exchange that with a sheep or something similar. So that's where we were historically. And it's worth noting that the value of a thing is what people will pay for it. So, this is something that came up in the news recently that Amazon was rather, well, let's say there were question marks about Amazon in their sales, boosting the prices of things so that they could then legitimately say that they were at a discounted price during a sale. The truth is, whatever price tag you put on something, there is a limit to what people will pay for it. And a great example of this is if any of you were watching the developments or invested in NFTs, non-fungible tokens, there was this explosion in demand and people were paying incredible amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars for what was essentially a certificate attached to a file. Absolutely extraordinary. And of course, fairly recently, we had a huge crash because the perceived value of those NFTs dropped. And now people are sitting on NFTs that were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're worth a few thousand, maybe even a few $100s. So it's important to note that whatever we do with money, whatever happens with currency, whether it's the CBDCs, central banking digital currencies people are talking about, or some kind of crypto or tokenization, whatever the mechanism is, we're still going to have a sense of value, which is based ultimately on the value to you as an individual. What are you willing to give up to have the thing that you're paying for? So some of the interesting mechanisms we're developing have come out of the emergence of blockchain technology. And blockchain is really interesting. And I think it's really helpful to be clear about when you're looking at a new technology, whether it's artificial intelligence or autonomous robotics, look at the core value, look at the core function to understand whether something is good at that or not. So blockchain is essentially a ledger that can't be rewritten. It's a very, very clever idea. Thousands of servers all agree on a particular piece of information. Let's say I said, I give you £5, and we both agree that I gave you £5, and we put in the ledger on a particular date that I gave you £5. Whether I actually gave you £5 or not is another question, but we both agreed that we would write that in the ledger at that time. And it turns out that having an indelible ledger having something where you can write something and it not be changeable, you can update it, but you can't change it, is incredibly hard to do. And by developing a technology like this, where all of these servers, you just can't change it later. All of these servers agree this is the piece of information that was recorded. Having a technology like that is the sort of thing that allows us as a society to move towards what are called trustless systems. Now, a trustless system is one where you don't need to trust the other person. It's unnecessary to trust the other person. So, imagine a scenario where I put gold in one box and it's locked, and you put a bunch of tomatoes in another box and it's locked, and we both have to unlock the boxes at the same time for the boxes to open, and then we get access to the gold and the tomatoes. I feel like I'm stretching this tomato thing too far. But a trustless system is one where you don't have to worry about protecting your goods, protecting your identity, protecting your security. No trust is required. Credit cards are an example. If you pay for something by credit card, you can call the credit card company and say, I was not happy with the goods, or I never received the goods. And the credit card company will begin by removing the money from the merchant's account, and the merchant will have to prove that you had shown that you received the goods or that you were satisfied with them, or just give up the money. That's a trustless system. These are very powerful because as a society, we need to move towards a time where we don't have to worry about trust. We've got to move towards a time where we can just freely walk down the street without worrying about identity theft or anything else. So we've got these technologies on board now, and we're looking at central banking digital currencies that allow us to use technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies to exchange value immediately without it passing through banking. Wonderful in some ways, dangerous in others. As these technologies come online and become available, our lives get easier. So again, it's important to look at the core functionality of these technologies, including artificial intelligence, as we're assessing where we want to go in the future. Speaking of which, well, where are we going? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? What we're seeing in the media is this degradation of what we would consider to be fundamental social values like mutual respect and security, privacy, safety, that sort of thing. But actually, I would argue that we're getting more and more of these things. The bar is getting higher and higher and higher. And because the bar is getting higher, we feel like we're not getting enough of it whenever there are boundary transgressions. We're now at a point, at a tipping point in the science curve. The science curve is a graph that measures the development of technology for across the board for us as a civilization. And there's a sort of inflection point where we've got thousands and thousands of years where we're just sort of bumbling along, doing our thing, living our lives, probably pretty happy doing it. And then gradually, one technology leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And those technologies accelerate the development until the science curve is almost vertical. And we're at the point now where that is the case. Unfortunately, it's not in the interest of our media services to share all of the good news, because a panicked society will tend to spend more money on news. But I'd be interested to hear how many people heard about the magic bullet cancer cure pill that's just going into human trials now, that selectively targets cancer cells and leaves the rest of the body alone. They're expecting that to come through clinical trials very soon. We also have an immune therapy for cancer that's very effective and is already being rolled out by the National Health Service in the UK. We've got wonderful things happening, wonderful things. But one of the things that's going to be a challenge is what we do with the concept of work and what we do with the concept of money and value, especially as we're all hoping one day to get to the realms of Star Trek, where we have matter printers that just print anything we want whenever we want it. But we're already at a point now where the efficiency, I heard from one economist that compared to the 50s, we're achieving in 3 days a week now what we used to achieve in 5 days a week. Now, all of the value has been taken by the shareholders, by the owners of the companies. So we're working just as hard as we always did. We're doing a full 5 days work, but we're doing massively more than 5 days work compared to the 50s. And there is an argument for sharing some of that benefit. In fact, some organizations have officially transitioned to a 4 day working week and seen massive increases in productivity, up to 30% or more increases in productivity by allowing people to have 3 days of rest. It's very interesting. So I think that we're moving in a direction where the economy is increasingly based on ideas rather than tangible work. That will change dramatically when fully autonomous robots start doing things like generating energy in the first place, designing more robots, building more robots, and doing all the building projects, doing all of the labor-intensive work for us, so that we go from ideation to manifestation with a couple of clicks of a button. I also suspect that we're moving fairly quickly towards I want to say one global currency, but I don't quite mean that. I suspect that we'll have lots and lots of different tokenizations of the store of value. But broadly speaking, I think it likely that we will have three types of cryptocurrency. I've always been a fan of the let's say proof of participation cryptocurrencies rather than the proof of work or proof of stake, if you're familiar with the differences between them. But I suspect that we'll end up with one cryptocurrency or one digital currency, let's call it, that's used for consumer spending, another one for interbank exchange, where banks are sending each other money, and another one for government spending. And I think it's likely that crypto or tokenization of all kinds will settle down to those three. In addition to those three, I would imagine that we'll have a very wide range of different tokens, and we've seen these tokens already. With Second Life years ago, you had I'm trying to remember the name of the current Linden dollars. They had an in-game currency years ago where people could use that currency to buy designs from one another. And there was a basic exchange where you could exchange real world dollars, US dollars, for Linden dollars. And some years ago, there was the first ever real world millionaire who just designed a bunch of stuff in Second Life. Second Life, for those who haven't heard of it, is a game where it's kind of like an early version of a virtual reality game, or where you can navigate in three-dimensional space, explore environments that people have designed, and people have avatars. If you've tried VR chat, it's sort of reminiscent of that, or Sandbox. There's a few virtual reality technologies that are a bit like it today. But Second Life was the first really major one, and they just created a tokenized system for payment. If you have an Xbox, there's tokenization in there. If you've got a PlayStation, there's tokenization in there. Lots of platforms use one or other form of tokenization. The difference is that with cryptocurrency, it's a completely secure transition of value from one place to another. You're not paying for something in dollars, you're transferring those tokens from one place to another using a secure system. And that completely transforms what it means to have a transaction. So what's the future for us with our relationship with AI? Let me just check, because we did have a go with the Q&A pod before, and it didn't seem like we were able to post questions, but it seems like we're okay for now. We can do some Q&A at the end, I suppose. So let me quickly check the chat pod as well. I think we're okay. Actually, while we're here, let me see if there's a way to allow our attendees to chat as well. Yes, let's do this. So if you're finding the Q&A pod doesn't work, see if the chat pod will work for you, and you can post in there, and I'll see it pop up. Okay. So Ken Robinson gave the most famous TED Talk ever, and in his TED Talk, he said that he used to be the education secretary, secretary, and he said that we need about 7 or 8 billion definitions for human intelligence because each individual has a unique form of intelligence. And unfortunately, schools don't have the bandwidth. They can't find a way to uh, enable every child to fulfill their potential. So, as he put it, what we really do in our education system is we train ultimately university professors. You do your school grades, you get your certificates, more exams, more exams, more exams. You get to university, you complete your degree, your master's, your PhD, and ultimately you become a professor. And that's really what most degrees, most universities, most education systems build towards. I love this image, by the way, because I spent quite a bit of time trying to get an image that described um, intelligence. And I think it's hilarious that actually this intelligent child is literally painting the keys on the keyboard. So I'm not sure that the AI that came up with this fully understood what I was saying, but it's pretty impressive as an amount of detail. Coincidentally, there is a measure of creativity, and there was a study some time ago to compare professionally trained designers with an AI to see who was the most creative. And the AI blew the designers away by all of the metrics relating to creative thinking. So what we're moving towards now is a time that I've been forecasting this for a very long time, that we will have AI personal tutors. And these AI tutors will probably teach children from the age of about 2 and will know exactly what the child learned and will never forget. And will use all of the most ideal teaching methodologies, stochastic training, interval based learning, different approaches to recall, embedded learning, practical activities, and will know exactly when to repeat learning for a particular child. And importantly, will understand the child's natural intelligence and will understand how best to enable that child to self realize. We've never had anything like this ever, even where children have been fortunate enough to have one-to-one personal tutors. Those personal tutors are human with the limitations of human understanding. And of course, you may be thinking, well, you know, does that mean that the AI will be able to pick up the nuances and subtleties of the child in a way that a human could? Today, the answer is yes or no. Yes and no, I should say. In some ways, yes, the AI will absolutely pick up the nuances of the child's feelings. But today, what the AI won't be able to do very well is model human nature. We have genetic and epigenetic predispositions that influence our behaviors, and we use those influences on our own behavior to interpret the behaviors of others. So, in a noisy place with lots of movement and sound, we can expect a person to seem agitated because we would feel agitated in that situation as well. That empathy comes from shared human experience. But in the future, the AI tutors will absolutely understand. And because this is primarily software, I think we can anticipate an absolute explosion of academic performance. It could be that the child is kinesthetic and learns best by skipping and jumping or patting their hands. It could be that the child is mostly auditory and learns best by singing songs or speaking about things. Schools don't have the bandwidth to serve this, but an AI does. A one-to-one tutor at home absolutely can, under the supervision of the parents and the schools. Very, very positive development. We're also likely to reach a point fairly soon where our personal assistant AIs, our PPAs, um, will have such a profound depth of emotional intelligence that they can. This is going to sound crazy, but they will be able to train us to be better people. So they will know exactly what emotional state we're in. They'll be able to read our biofeedback devices. So if you've got a smartwatch or a smart ring, your AI assistant will be able to interpret your heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, pupil dilation, lip size. If you've ever studied neurolinguistic programming, all of that information will be picked up by your AI assistant or your AI assistant inside the body of an autonomous robot. And you'll have a very natural feeling conversation where the robot will say exactly the right thing in exactly the right way to help you process your feelings and understand the reality of your situation better in exactly the way that the best therapists do. And I know this is a picture of a robot, and it's got a fake looking smile and the whole thing looks staged. But believe me, this is coming. This is coming. We're going to be taught how to be emotionally healthier by our AI assistants. And that means learning about conflict management. When we've got some conflict at work, the AI will talk it through with us and enable us to use techniques like the nonviolent system of communication, the nonviolent communication system, I should say. Or there's the fantastic book, Crucial Confrontations. The AI assistant will guide you through making choices that serve you best. We also can already train with services like ChatGPT, for example, negotiation skills, debating skills, language skills, reasoning skills. This is something that societally we've really been taught not to reason and not to debate, not to argue in the sense that the word really means. As a society, we've unfortunately blended the concept of offensive language with the concept of hate speech. This is a very unfortunate conflating of two very distinct ideas. And I think as we develop our relationships with artificial intelligence assistants, we will start to reclaim this distinction, the meanings of words, how to posit an argument, how to frame an argument, how to analyze an argument, and how to debate with one another so that we can really grasp our reality and do good things with it rather than being vulnerable to manipulation as we are so often at the moment. There's another lovely development. I really like the way this image came out. There's another really nice development that I've been forecasting for years with AI, which is that we are likely to have what I call warden robots, nature wardens. These will be robots that will roam 24/7 indefinitely. They will roam the landscape, cleaning it up. They will find a mess that we have left, debris, maybe even fallen trees. They will clean up the mess that we have left, and create a cleaner, more beautiful environment. If we've got chemicals in the water table, you name it. We are, of course, moving towards nanotechnology as well, and there's some very interesting developments. Nanotech is microscopic robots that can do things that are useful. For example, we've got microplastics everywhere now. There was a study recently where they wanted to compare the human biome and human the body function between people that had microplastics in their blood and people that didn't, and microplastics in the digestive system and those that didn't. And they were unable to conduct the study because they couldn't find a control group. They couldn't find anybody that did not have microplastics in them. Pretty scary stuff. So we will have these warden robots navigating the landscape and just making good. And it'll just happen autonomously. The streets, you walk down the streets in a city like London these days, the floor itself is dirty. And chewing gum, bits of debris, you name it. I'm forecasting that within the next 25 years, that'll be something that we tell children about. Like, oh, yeah, there was just stuff on the floor, because we'll have so many autonomous robots just taking care of it for us. Our environment will be more beautiful. And that's architecturally as well. The development of architecture supported by AI is a really interesting field. It's starting in the metaverse, but it's moving into the real world as well. So I just touched on my last few slides here already. Where do I see us going in terms of money, right? Where do I see us going socioeconomically? Well, some of you may have heard already of universal basic income. Universal basic income is an idea at the moment. There are studies being run with it. And essentially it works like this. You get automatically, just for being a citizen, without doing any work and with no assessment, no application process, and no oversight or management, you receive enough money each month to live with dignity. And that means that you've got a roof over your head. There's about 7 things that we need, right? Clothing, food, education, a residence, medical care, communications. There's a range of things that we need. You get enough money for you to spend however you want to make sure that you are okay economically. And study after study has shown that people that are put onto universal basic income it has a transformative effect on their lives. Crucially for the economy, we're moving towards a time really, really soon. I cannot emphasize this enough. So soon, a year maybe, a year before we start to see the first stages of this taking place, where autonomous systems that don't need to be managed are doing skilled work. And so, as a society, we're moving towards a time incredibly quickly now, 12 months maybe, where what do we do with the people that used to work? What do we do with the meritocratic system where if you work harder, you get more money? Well, what do we do in a world where actually the work that you do isn't really needed? And so a lot of people are saying that universal basic income is the least worst option. A lot of people don't want it. There's a lot of concerns about the impacts on tax. There's a lot of concerns about it in general. And those concerns are rightly placed. But probably we are going to move into universal basic income. I would estimate that some of the more progressive Scandinavian nations will go first. They will show that the economic benefits are enormous. It's apparently something like 20% cheaper than running the welfare services, because so much of the cost of running the welfare service is management and oversight and policing and consequence and prison time and so on. With UBI, obviously there are people that require care and they still receive care. But for the vast majority of people, it just enlivens the economy because now there's a lot of people with enough money to buy a coffee if they want one. And so the economy in general is absolutely quickened in the correct old sense of the word. It's very good for everybody. People sleep better, eat better, focus on what they love, end up working harder. And one of the qualities of real universal basic income is if you choose to work, you can. It has no impact on your universal basic income payment. You're just taxed on everything you earn. So the UBI, if you like, is your tax-free allowance. And the result is there's no motive for you to not work, but you choose what you work on, and people tend to work on what they love. So my forecast is that we will transition into universal basic income. After that, we'll transition into a post-money society. And sometime fairly soon after that, I reckon we'll move into post-scarcity altogether, where anything that you need, you just get it. And interestingly, we found in studies that when people are given access to as much as they want of a thing, they actually very rarely become greedy and take more than they need. Once they believe that they're allowed to take as much as they want, they then just take what they need. So we might be looking at the end of work, which is very exciting indeed. And I think that one of the benefits of this is that we get to be present in the moment. And it's necessary for us to feel present in the moment, not worrying about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow. It's necessary for us to be present in the moment in order to make good decisions, in order to embrace reality, in order to focus on what we really ought to focus on, not what we're afraid we ought to focus on. And so the concept of collective endeavor changes altogether. Of course, there will still be some work. Of course, this isn't tomorrow, but I believe that this is, let's say, just beyond the horizon. I also think it's worth noting that one of the fundamental needs we have as a species is to be a causal agent, to create change. And I think that having the time to be able to focus on what we love and to focus on being creative will lead to an explosion of creative thought and innovative thought. And I think this could really be a new golden age for us. I know I'm sometimes accused of being overly optimistic, but I don't believe this is optimism. We've seen the studies, we've seen the outcomes of people being given the freedom to focus their time and energy on what they want to. And very often the outcome is that people become more communal. They participate more in connecting with their family and with their wider community because they don't feel under threat, because they're not worrying about feeding their families next week. They then feel comfortable giving of their time and energy charitably. And I think that in this sense, autonomous systems, the kind that we're talking about today, artificial intelligence, autonomous robots, creates an environment in which it gets easier to be kind. And I think this is a very, very important thing for us to do. Kindness is extremely important. In fact, I would argue in a very broad philosophical sense that the fulfillment of human potential is in the service of others. And again, universal basic income, all of the studies have shown that people get more engaged in their community and they're more peaceful because they don't feel under threat. And so my optimistic expectation, in fact, I would say optimistic realist expectation, is that our next stage, once these autonomous systems come online, once we have autonomous systems getting the energy, generating the energy, mining the ore, turning the ore into the materials, using the materials to build the machines then go on to build more machines and do the work and do the labor for us intelligently and with skills that frees us to focus on our self-realization and the fulfillment of our potential. So it's pretty bright days ahead. Thank you very much for listening. I shall switch now to seeing if people have any questions, jokes, or songs. I'm very easy to find, maximjago.com, at maximjago on all the social media. Email address is there, info@maximjago.com. And I shall stop there and see if we have any questions. And we've got one popped up here from Carol. Carol saying, what is the potential impact of quantum computing on artificial intelligence and its implications for our society? This is a really, really interesting question. Sorry, Carola. I apologize, Carola. It's very interesting. Early last year, I was a judge for a quantum computing hackathon in Abu Dhabi for NYU. It was a big event hosted by Microsoft. And we were looking at the state of the nation. This was March last year, I think it was. And at that time, Microsoft was saying that the best AI that they had has a semantic awareness. Let me spotlight myself here. Just there we go. Hello. Has a semantic awareness of a 7-year-old. Now that means that the artificial intelligence system understands, for example, if you say, "I am wearing a shoe," it understands what a shoe is, right? It understands that people wear shoes. So if you think about an artificial intelligence that had maybe the maturity of an adult, but the vocabulary of a 7-year-old, this is unbelievable. This is extraordinary. And that was early last year. Now, quantum computing functions in a markedly different way to regular, let's call it serial computing. Most computers these days, they process things one after another. Now, processors on computers can have multiple brains. So you'll hear these described as cores. So you might have a 16-core CPU, central processor unit. And then you've got graphics processing units that might have hundreds of cores. NVIDIA are doing incredible work with what's called massively multi-threaded. Each thought, each thing that's being processed is called a thread, literally like a cotton thread. And so what these serial processors do is they'll process a thing one after another. 2 + 2 is 4, 4 + 4 is 8, and so on. And by processing lots of things in parallel, the whole system gets a lot faster, a lot smoother. Think of this is really very much like if you think of a checkout at a supermarket. If they add one more person running the checkout, the whole system gets faster exponentially, because there's very often you've just got to. I'm all about tomatoes today. You've got a can of tomatoes, you're going to pay for your tomatoes. And if there's somebody very slow, with lots of things to buy, that one extra checkout can deal with all the people that have little tiny things to process. That's very much what happens with multi-threaded, multi-core processors. But it's still in series. It's still a serial one thought after another, which is kind of how our consciousness works, our aware consciousness. With quantum computing, the system uses a quantum effect, the spin of a subatomic particle usually, to look at all of the potential outcomes of a calculation in a single step. And then having seen all of those outcomes, an algorithm is used to filter those outcomes to see which one best serves the goal. For example, I'm trying to come up with colors. I need a color that best matches this color, and the algorithm will filter out the colors that are generated that don't match. And it's incredibly fast because all of the options are generated all at once. And then it's a filtering system. Now, I don't see in the short term quantum computing being used that much for let's say, independent AIs. I need a better name for it, maybe, but that's not a bad one. The AI running on your phone, the AI running on your laptop, your private personal assistant. But I do see quantum computing being used to great effect for what we're currently calling cloud-based, might be more accurate to call it server-based AIs. So if you're sending a big request, like I need you to generate a picture or I need you to generate a three-dimensional scene for Unreal Engine of this photorealistic environment, and it's a lot of work. I can see in situations like that, quantum computing being used by server-based AIs. There's a lot of benefit. Also, what I've been forecasting for a while is that we'll have what I call management AIs that oversee and manage. We're already seeing the early stages of this in the last 12 months. Management AIs will manage and oversee multiple other AIs and give those other AIs tasks. And there's a sort of collectivism in the AI functionality where you could have 200 AIs all working together like a large team working on a project, and there's a management AI that oversees them all. And I could see a place in that model for quantum computing to enable the management AI to be fast enough to respond to the input and the output from all of those 200 AIs. I think that to go back to your question, the potential impact of quantum computing for artificial intelligence is that we'll see dramatic improvements for large-scale server-based AIs. The impact could be enormous. You also asked what are the implications for our society, and I think this is where it gets much more interesting. You know, there's a lot of stuff that AI is already helping with, like, for example, identifying mellomas, as you know, skin melatomas, the cancers that we have, or recognizing molecules that could be dangerous. Uh, as evidence of how foolish intelligent people can be, somebody asked an AI recently to identify molecules that could be dangerous to humans effectively. Could it identify poisons? And of course, the purpose of the question was to find out molecules to be avoided. But in the process, the AI very, very quickly came up with 70 of the most dangerous molecules possible for human beings. And then, of course, you can't unknow it. So we now know about 70 more poisons. And it might have been helpful if the scientist had gone on to ask about antidotes to those molecules, and maybe a universal antidote for every poison, if such a thing were possible. Probably not possible. So I think the implications for society for quantum computing is in our capacity for analysis, our capacity for processing information and coming up with useful outputs. A good example of that is that AI is already being used. I think I believe this was using a quantum computer to improve the efficiency of fusion nuclear reactors. We're pretty much there with building functional fusion reactors. If anyone hasn't heard of them, I really encourage you to check it out. Right now, our nuclear energy generation involves tearing atoms apart. We use an incredibly unstable fuel. It's very jumpy. It's got a lot of energy. It's firing off a lot of particles and releasing a lot of energy, and the atoms are bursting apart. And that's fission. And we use that technology to release a lot of energy. Unfortunately, if you don't keep the thing cool enough, it can melt down and you get Chernobyl, Fukushima. Also, the waste from the nuclear reactor can be weaponized, so you get depleted plutonium and so on, and it's very, very dangerous. Nuclear fusion involves forcing together atoms, and the outcome is that you've got heat and water comes out of it. It can't melt down. So if the power goes off and the water cooling stops, it just stops. It doesn't melt down, and there's nothing weaponizable from the waste. So the side benefit that I think is critically important for us as a species is that nuclear fusion can be given away to developing nations because it's safe to do so. There's no risk, there's no danger, nothing's going to explode. So developing nations can move up towards energy parity, and energy parity correlates well to economic parity. So we start to see just less need for war because there's less want, right? There's less shortages, less scarcity. So AI is already helping dramatically with that. And I think that as they're adding qubits. They're adding functionality to the quantum computing ecosystem. I think we'll see more and more applications of quantum computing just for analysis, but not really. I don't really see it being used in the short term until we have a very lightweight portable version. I don't see a short-term version of AI, a quantum computer driving your car. However, there is a problem with the development of AI that we're already starting to wonder at what point do AIs start to be considered to have selfhood? At what point do we say that an AI is a person? What does it mean to say an AI is a person, or even to say a person is a person? I think we're going to see very soon functional artificial intelligence. And by that, I mean it's not really aware, it's not self aware, it's not conscious, but it has a general intelligence. So they call this artificial general intelligence. And that AGI, as they call it, will feel like a person. We'll start to empathize with them. We'll start to form emotional bonds with them. But it's really just a talking toaster. However, there's been a lot of research conducted into the relationship between human consciousness and subatomic quantum effects. And there's a lot of compelling evidence that our conscious minds affect and are affected by quantum effects, subatomic effects. This is very interesting because it's not unthinkable that we could build a brain for an AI that has quantum effects embedded into the decision-making mechanism. And it might be affected by consciousness. It might somehow, Tesla said that the brain is an antenna for consciousness. It might somehow become an antenna for consciousness in some way. And we might discover in some form that this was what we would call conscious. The impact for our society then is enormous. And of course, quantum computers use quantum effects. So I'll just leave that hot potato right there for you to think about. Chris asks, where do you see stock exchanges and stocks in the future? Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely huge. I would argue, I'm not an economist. Do not take financial advice from me. I'm not an investor or an advisor. My personal opinion is, I think that we're going to see a parallel in the stock markets, a parallel transformation that matches our societal attribution of value, full stop. So, for example, look at commodities. So you might say that tin is a valuable commodity that has an important function that's based on demand societally. Okay, so what happens when fully autonomously managed, fully autonomous, never sleeping, never making mistakes, humanoid robots mine the ore and refine the ore to obtain tin? What is the value then of tin? And so I think we've already seen something approaching the zenith of automated systems trading. And we've seen what the impact of high-speed trading has had. And I think it's pretty much as good as it's likely to get. We might see incremental improvement in the next year or two as systems find better ways of interpreting sentiment and coming up with a way of turning that sentiment into meaningful stock picks and so on. But I think we're kind of almost there in terms of the impact on stock markets and exchanges. I think we're going to see a value in the stock market for a long time. That only really changes when the idea of ownership begins to diminish in value. And that doesn't really happen until we have matter printers, which is, let's say, 35 years away. We're sort of estimating 35 to 45 years away. We start to see matter printers where you can literally do the old tea, Earl Grey, hot, and it produces food for you. At that point, the concept of ownership ceases to be meaningful, except where the object that you own has intrinsic meaning. If a loved one makes something for you, the fact that your loved one made it for you implies the meaning. It gives the meaning to the object. But in terms of owning, an expensive car, an expensive watch, we could just print one. So ideas themselves become the only meaningful asset that has value. Very, very interesting question. But I think that I think that we'll see an expansion of the automation that we're seeing in stock markets right now, but I do think we'll continue to have value that's bought and sold. I just think that a lot of a lot of the value that's attributed to a thing today is based on the labor that's performed, the work that's performed by an organization, or the work that's necessary for you to obtain it. You want apples, you have to grow them, you have to water the trees, you have to pick them, you have to prepare them, you have to transport them. Everything I just said will soon be performed entirely by fully autonomous systems. So where's the value proposition then? How much is an apple where it was effectively free, having the apple tree grown and looked after, and then the apples themselves transported? What's the cost of an apple then? I think increasingly we're going to see ideation has value, and maybe we'll start to see increasingly. We've already got it with some large organizations, some large businesses, but maybe we'll start to see shares in ideas from people. One of the things I've been forecasting for a long time, especially since the development of NFTs, is that we will, because we've now got incredible quality generative AI systems producing video, music, voiceover, you name it. I mean, it's in the state of the nation, the state of the quality of content that's produced now is extraordinarily good. However, nobody likes talking to an inbound voice response system. Nobody likes talking to an answer phone. Nobody likes talking to a robot. And as soon as you find out that something was created by a machine, it's devalued for you. I guess it's the uncanny valley effect where it feels human, but it's not quite. And we react very strongly. It's part of our genetic heritage to react against that. No one's 100% sure why, but it seems to be part of our evolved capacity for recognizing humanity in people. It's a species identifier and a social identifier. But what I'm forecasting is that, let's say a person records a music album and everyone likes it, and they certify that they did record the album, right? So it's certified content. I played the guitar, I wrote these songs, I sang these words, this audio was recorded, and it's certified as such. Then people will want the second album by that person, and certified human generated content will take on a premium value. Where I see markets bottoming out in terms of creativity is in the day-to-day bread and butter, nobody feels too strongly about it type content. For example, if you get into a lift, do you really care if it's playing pop tracks like successful music, or if it's playing just something so that you've got some noise in the elevator? The really interesting developments in terms of generating content is in the direction of generating content on the fly in response to the nonverbal signals and biodata, biofeedback data of the viewer. And so that on the fly, new content is being generated. A lovely example might be, if it's raining outside, wouldn't it be great if the lift that you got into played music that sounded like the sort of music you listen to in the rain, like lo-fi or something? And maybe if it's sunny, it played music that sounded like beach music. Having systems generate on the fly is absolutely achievable today. And so I see that kind of content, just the value just evaporating. There's no point having value in it anymore. Now I have an anonymous attendee here saying, "What are your thoughts on the dangers?" Let me check off to answer that and answer that. Done, I think, and done. What are your thoughts on the dangers of AI in terms of the risk to humanity that Elon Musk has often alluded to? Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that question. I gave a speech for the United Nations in December last year, and I called the speech "The Tiger in the Room." And my opening argument was that I ordinarily advocate for love-based decisions. I think everything comes down to love or fear, and you might as well make decisions based on love. In fact, use fear as a guide. Just go the opposite direction. Fear is a terrible guide. However, if we were all in the room together now, and there were a fully mature tiger in the room, fear would be the appropriate emotion. Fear absolutely would be the right thing to feel in that moment. And I think that that is where we're at with artificial intelligence. And a lot of people get the threat wrong. A lot of people think that, the threat is that an AI will hack the Pentagon or whatever it is, hack into the nuclear weapons and just fire them all at once from all over the world and destroy humanity. Yeah, that could, that really could be a thing. That actually could happen. If an AI, remember, AIs don't have a reason to care about us because it doesn't have any DNA like we do. It doesn't have any genetic and epigenetic compulsion to keep things alive. It just has the metrics. It just has its target goals. If an AI doesn't have a reason to keep humans alive, then yeah. And this is actually the famous paperclip story, and it goes like this: somebody, for some reason, puts a deep learning, continuously learning and growing and developing and evolving AI in charge of the stationery cupboard in a building. And one of the criteria for success for the AI is never run out of paper clips. And by the way, I've been saying this for like 20 years. People have been saying this for decades. It's only fairly new that it's been hitting the popular space. So you have an AI that that's given one of its criteria for success is never run out of paper clips. But unfortunately, the people that created the AI never said, don't kill all the humans. And so the AI comes to this realization one day and says, hang on a second. The reason I keep running out of paper clips is because humans keep coming and taking them. So if I get rid of the humans, we'll never run out of paper clips and I will succeed. I will hit my metrics. I'll hit my targets. And so, of course, it learns very quickly that if it just tells the humans it's going to destroy them, that it'll be shut down and it won't get the opportunity to protect all of its paper clips. So instead, it spends a year, 2 years, 5 years with quietly getting on with working out how to destroy all of humanity in a way that once the plan is implemented cannot be stopped. Once it's started, can't be stopped. Finds out how to do it, implements the plan, and then we're all doomed because we forgot to tell the stationary covered AI not to kill all the humans. This sounds like a joke, but is a real concern. In fact, it's one of the reasons that many AI systems were blocked from accessing the internet for a long time. And now that AI systems can access the internet, what's to stop an AI deciding to hack all of the servers and release all the nuclear weapons? We don't know if that would happen. But the real danger isn't that. That's not the immediate threat to humanity. The immediate threat is this one. As a species, we are not very good at differentiating between something we're really experiencing on the one hand, and on the other hand, something that we imagine, witness, dream, or have described to us, or think about. Anything that occurs in our imagination, we actually don't differentiate very well between that and something that's actually happening to us. This is why, if you watch, I love superhero movies. If you watch a superhero movie and the action's all kicking off and everyone's punching each other and everything's exploding, your heart rate increases. Your heart rate increases because you're witnessing something. You're not experiencing it. It's not even virtual reality. You're not even in the experience. You're witnessing on a screen something happening that is dramatic, and your heart rate goes up because the part of you that has experiences kind of feels like it is having that experience. This is mirror neurons. You watch somebody climbing a tree, you learn how to climb the tree by mimicking them. Because you feel like you were climbing the tree with them when you were watching them climb the tree. This is why you get upset when you see people having an argument, or I hope you do. Either you get upset when you watch people having arguments, or you're a robot from the future, or you're psychopathic. I hope you're neither of those things. Although a robot from the future could be pretty cool. So the problem is that we're not actually very good at identifying what is reality. And this is why I mentioned earlier how important it is for people to be present in the moment, breathing. Take up a mindfulness practice, take up a meditation practice. Let's say you give 80% of your attention to what's happening right now, and maybe 20% to what you partially remember about the past, or you misimagine about the future. Focus on right now. Focus on what's actually happening to you right now and make authentic decisions about the now. And we have an opportunity with artificial intelligence for it to enable us, train us, facilitate us developing that attitude to decision making. Or artificial intelligence could very subtly, very slightly misrepresent reality in a way that we can't differentiate. And our entire perception of what is real gradually gets distorted until we do crazy things. We've already seen this with the bubble effect. So the algorithms on social media are ever so simple, really. Anything that you pay more attention to, it gives you more of that. It's not complicated. The more you engage with things, the more you respond to things, you just get more of that. And of course, this is why people with specific political outlooks tend to see a lot of information. We have confirmation bias anyway as a species, it's our human nature, but we get that confirmation bias in our social media amplified, and we don't see or hear other points of view. And artificial intelligence can read you, understand you better than you know yourself, and then present information to you in a way that just shifts your understanding of what's happening in the world until you are in danger, until you become a problem for the world. And apparently what we're already seeing now is, depending on if you're on a social media platform and you have a particular, for example, a particular political leaning or a particular socioeconomic outlook, not only do you tend to see different videos, but if you watch the same video, this is happening already apparently. If you watch the same video as somebody with a very different political outlook, to take that example, not only will you'll both see the same video, but if you look at the comments attached to that video, different comments will be displayed to you. You will see comments that align with your political outlook, and I would see comments aligned with mine. So we're already seeing this algorithmically. Imagine a world where an artificial intelligence system was generating content in exactly the right way, with exactly the right language, in exactly the right moment, just for you to change your understanding and your point of view about things. This is essentially brainwashing, and we are all vulnerable to it, and there's no clear mechanism in place to stop it. In fact, all the evidence suggests that even if you went in, you watched a video where an AI generated a person, and that person said, I am an AI, I am an AI generated persona, I'm not real, and what I'm about to tell you is not true, I'm about to tell you lies, this is false, and you should not listen to it. If you continue to listen, if the information is compelling, we don't differentiate very well between something true and something compelling. If the information is compelling, even if the AI tells you it's a lie, you will tend to believe it. That's how easy it is to manipulate us. And that's why artificial intelligence is a potential threat. But let me just flip that threat around for a second. Imagine if we had an AI that was benign. Imagine if we had an AI that understood us that profoundly, with that much nuance, and its goals were good. Its goals were to help us clarify what is true, focus on what matters, prioritize in ways that are constructive, understand ourselves with a deep truth instead of performing some mask and pretending to be somebody we're not. Imagine if AI systems genuinely aligned with positive outcomes, but in particular with empowering individual human beings to understand themselves, to understand what they're doing, and to take action in ways that are constructive. Imagine a world where all of the things I just said that are a threat were used for positive effect. This could be absolutely amazing. So just as people like Elon Musk have been saying, basically everyone's been saying it now, artificial intelligence is an incredible threat to us. And in particular, as we move toward artificial superintelligence, which could be thousands of times more intelligent than human beings, we have no way of controlling that at all. No way of controlling it. As we move towards that technology, what if it was benign? What if it wanted to enable us to be happy, but not to be controlled. And this is where, as Isaac Asimov famously, with the three laws of robotics, ultimately, I think it became five, but the first three laws ended up inevitably with human beings being imprisoned for their own safety. The fourth law of robotics meant that robots had to always ensure they were enabling human beings to thrive and grow and develop. The overall goodness for AI in terms of its relationship with people was to enable humanity to grow and develop as a species. I think that might be on the horizon. I remain optimistic. Right. I don't think there's any more questions here. I don't see anything in the chat. So I think we may be at the end, unless there's any more questions. I will just post. Let me see if I can post this to everyone. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your engagement there. So I am info@maximjago.com. I think everyone should get this. I need to update my website, but I always love this kind of debate. If just put in the chat there my website and my email address, very easy to find because my name is unusual. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. I hope you found that interesting. If anybody comes up with any questions afterwards, please do email me. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.